Breaking news in the murders of 4 college students in Moscow, Idaho on November 13th.
One of the roommates has passed out, and she was drunk last night and she's not waking up.
That was the call. It came in just before noon on November 13th, 2022. The voice on the other end is frantic, confused. The phone gets passed around.
Hello? Okay, I need someone to stop passing the phone around because I've talked to 4 different people. Okay.
On the surface, it sounded like a typical Sunday morning in a college town, a party house, a student who had too much to drink. But you need to listen closer. Buried in the chaos is something much more terrifying.
Oh, and they saw some man in their house last night. Yeah.
That detail gets lost. The dispatcher is focused on the immediate medical emergency. Is she breathing? The answer is a quiet, chilling no. Police arrive at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho. It's a 3-story rental home, just a short walk from the University of Idaho campus. They're expecting to find a medical situation, maybe an alcohol poisoning case. What they found was a slaughterhouse. Also, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? What city are you in? And what's the time and weather like where you are right now? It's always interesting to hear how this story reaches people all over the world. I'm really happy you're here with me. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new stories. The officers walk in, and the scene is so horrific, it's almost impossible to process. On the 2nd floor, they find the body of 20-year-old Xana Kernodle. Lying right next to her is her boyfriend, 20-year-old Ethan Chapin. Both had been stabbed to death, but it doesn't stop there. They move to the 3rd floor, and in one bedroom, they find 2 more victims, 21-year-old Madison Mogan and her best friend, 21-year-old Kaylee Goncalves. They were in the same bed. They had been killed as they slept. 4 students, 4 lives, just gone. All victims of a brutal, vicious knife attack. How could this happen? This wasn't a big city. This was Moscow, Idaho, a town that hadn't seen a murder in 7 years. The initial 911 call was for 1 unconscious person, but the reality was 4 people were dead. They had been for hours. The initial report was a mistake, born from shock and utter disbelief. But then, police learned something that makes the entire situation even more baffling. 2 other roommates were in the house the entire night, on the 1st floor, and they survived. They slept through a quadruple homicide happening just 1 floor above them. Or did they? The community was instantly terrified. Was this a targeted attack? Was it a random home invasion? Was the killer still out there, watching? Parents rushed to campus to pull their kids out of school. Students barricaded themselves in their dorms. Think about it. You go to sleep in your own bed, in a house full of your best friends, and in the morning, half of them are gone. As investigators swarmed the house on King Road, they were facing a nightmare scenario. No forced entry, no obvious motive, no murder weapon. And as night fell on that small Idaho town, the chilling reality set in. They had a monster on the loose, and they had absolutely no idea who they were looking for. 2 people made it out of the King Road house alive. Their names were Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funke. They were the other roommates, living on the 1st floor, and they were the only key police had to unlocking this nightmare. Investigators separated them immediately. What did they see? What did they hear? Bethany Funke told police she heard something, but she was in her room and didn't see anything. But Dylan's story was different. Her statement, detailed in court documents, is the closest thing we have to a witness account of the terror inside that house. She told police she was woken up around 4 a.m. She heard what she thought was Kaylee Goncalves playing with her dog in one of the upstairs bedrooms. A short time later, she heard something else, a voice she thought was Kaylee's saying something like, "There's someone here." But then she heard crying. It was coming from Xana Kernodle's room, and then she heard a man's voice. He said something chillingly gentle. "It's okay. I'm going to help you." This is the point where every single one of us asks the same question. What would you do? You're in your bed. It's 4 in the morning. You hear strange noises. A man's voice. Do you get up? Do you call the police? Dylan opened her door. She looked out into the hallway. Nothing. She opened it a second time. More crying. And then she opened her door a third time. And that's when she saw him. A figure, clad in black clothing and a mask that covered his mouth and nose. He wasn't tall. He wasn't short. He was about 5'10", athletically built but not muscular. Just a man. And he walked right past her. She described him as having bushy eyebrows. He walked past her door, towards the back sliding glass door of the house, and she just stood there, frozen. She told investigators she was in a state of frozen shock. She didn't understand what she was seeing. She locked her door, and she didn't come out again until the next morning. The inaction is hard to understand, but the psychology of terror is a powerful, paralyzing thing. So now police had a description, a ghost in the night. But that's all they had. They had no name, no murder weapon, despite searching every inch of that house. And most importantly, they had no motive. Why these 4 students? Was it a robbery gone wrong? A crime of passion? A random thrill kill? The public was demanding answers, but the Moscow Police Department had none. They were a small-town force suddenly at the center of the biggest murder case in the country. The pressure was unimaginable. For weeks, the case felt frozen, just like Dylan on that night. No new leads, no suspects. Just a terrifying story of a masked man with bushy eyebrows who disappeared into the Idaho darkness. But investigators did have one thing, a faint image on a grainy security camera that would blow this case wide open. The ghost in the night made a mistake. He didn't leave a weapon. He didn't leave a fingerprint. But he left a shadow, a flicker of white on a grainy security camera. Investigators, desperate for any lead, started pulling footage from every camera in the neighborhood surrounding 1122 King Road. And on a camera just down the street, they found it. A white sedan. It wasn't just driving by, it was circling. The footage showed the car passing the victim's home 3 times starting at 3:29 a.m. On the 4th pass, it stopped. The car stayed in the area for nearly an hour, and then, at 4:20 a.m., it was seen speeding away from the King Road area at a high rate of speed. The timing was perfect. It matched Dylan Mortenson's account almost to the minute. This was their killer's car. But what was it? Police initially put out a general, "Bolo, be on the lookout for a white sedan." Think about that for a second. How many white cars are there in a college town, let alone the entire region? It was a needle in a haystack. So, they brought in the FBI. An expert analyst pored over the blurry footage, frame by frame, and they came back with a make and model. A 2011 to 2016 white Hyundai Elantra. Now, they had something real. Investigators immediately ran a search. They were looking for anyone who registered a car like that in the Moscow, Idaho, and Pullman, Washington area. Why Pullman? Because it's home to Washington State University, just a 15-minute drive away. On November 29th, a campus police officer at WSU ran a query. He was looking for white Elantras registered to students or staff. He got a hit. A 2015 white Hyundai Elantra, registered to a PhD student named Brian Christopher Koberger. Suddenly, they had a name. They pulled his driver's license photo. Bushy eyebrows. It matched Dylan's description. The pieces were starting to snap into place. But here's where the investigation goes from a lucky break to something truly terrifying. They got a warrant for his cell phone records, and what they found painted a picture not of a random attack, but of a calculated, obsessive hunt. Kohberger's phone hadn't just been in the area on the night of the murders. His phone pinged off cell towers near the King Road house at least 12 separate times in the months leading up to the attack. Most of these pings were late at night or in the very early hours of the morning. It looked like stalking. He was allegedly watching them, learning their routines, waiting. And then there's the night of the murders. The data shows his phone leaving his apartment in Pullman, Washington at 2:47 a.m. It travels towards Moscow. And then, just before the attack, it goes dark. It stops reporting to the network. An obvious attempt, prosecutors say, to hide his location. The phone turns back on at 4:48 a.m. south of Moscow, on a highway heading back towards Pullman. They had the car. They had the phone data. They had a pattern. They had a name. The ghost now had a face. But who was this man? Who was the PhD student who allegedly used his knowledge to plan the perfect murder? The man in the white Elantra wasn't some drifter. He wasn't a local addict. The man police now believed was the killer from King Road was a PhD student. And he wasn't studying history or engineering. He was studying criminology. His name was Brian Kohberger, 28 years old. And on paper, his life seemed dedicated to understanding the criminal mind, not acting on it. He had a master's degree in criminal justice from DeSales University. He had even worked with a professor on a research project asking former criminals why they committed their crimes and how they chose their targets. Think about that. He was studying the very thought process that goes into a violent attack. At the time of the murders, he had just moved to Pullman, Washington, to start his PhD program at Washington State University. He was one of their top applicants. He was studying side by side with people who would go on to become police officers, federal agents, and crime analysts. He was learning about police procedure, forensic science, and legal loopholes. He was, in essence, being taught how to solve the exact kind of crime he is now accused of committing. The audacity is almost unbelievable. Could he have thought he could use his academic knowledge to plan the perfect crime? As investigators in Idaho were building their case, Kohberger finished his semester at WSU. And then, he did something incredibly bold. He got in his white Hyundai Elantra and started driving cross-country. With his own father in the passenger seat, they were heading home to Pennsylvania for the holidays. And on that drive, they got pulled over. Twice.
Hello. How you doing? How y'all doing today? Good, good. Take a look at your driver's license real quick if I could. See, he's right up on that van, man. He was right up on the back end of that van. Pulled you over for tailgating.
This is police body cam footage from a traffic stop in Indiana on December 15th. That's Kohberger behind the wheel. The officer is calm, professional. It's a routine stop for tailgating.
Is this your car? Okay, cool. Where are you headed?
Well, we're coming from WSU, and we're standing early.
What's WSU? So we're, okay, I'm having a hard time hearing you because of the traffic. So you're coming from Washington State University?
Yeah.
And you're going where? Oh.
We're going to be going to Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We're slightly punchy because we're driving for hours.
Hours, days.
Hours. We're driving.
Yeah. Okay. And what
Listen to how calm he is, talking to a police officer. Just weeks after he allegedly committed a quadruple homicide, his father is sitting right there. The car they are in is the exact car police across the country are desperately searching for. But at this point, the bolo hadn't been shared that widely. The officer had no idea who he had just pulled over. He lets them go with a warning. Koberger made it home to Pennsylvania. He spent Christmas with his family. He acted like nothing was wrong. To the world, he was just a brilliant student home for the holidays. But the net was closing. Police had the car. They had the cell phone data that showed him allegedly stalking the house. They had a physical description that matched. They had a powerful circumstantial case. But they knew it wasn't enough. A good lawyer could punch holes in all of it. They needed something physical, something that couldn't be explained away. They needed to place Bryan Koberger inside that house. And to do that, they needed his DNA. The biggest break in the case wasn't found in a security video or a cell tower log. It was found in the bed, lying next to the bodies of Madison, Mogan, and Kaylee Goncalves. It was a single item the killer had left behind in his haste. A tan leather knife sheath. On the sheath was a button snap, and on that snap, investigators found a tiny speck of biological material, a single source of male DNA. It was too small to run through CODIS, the National DNA Database. But it was everything. If they could match this DNA to a suspect, the case would be locked. This was the physical evidence they desperately needed. So, while Bryan Koberger was at home in Pennsylvania with his family, the FBI was watching him. An elite surveillance team tracked his every move. But they didn't just watch him. They watched his house. They watched his parents. And most importantly, they watched his trash. On December 27, 2022, law enforcement in Pennsylvania collected the garbage from the Koberger family home. It was a high-stakes gamble. They sifted through bags of holiday waste, looking for anything that might have Bryan Koberger's DNA on it. A used tissue, a water bottle, a discarded razor. They found what they were looking for. They sent the sample to the Idaho State Laboratory. The lab technicians then performed what's called a familial DNA comparison. They weren't looking for a direct match to Bryan, but to a close relative. The DNA from the trash came back as a near-certain match for the father of the person who left their DNA on the knife sheath. They had him. The DNA on the sheath wasn't a random person's. It wasn't contamination from a first responder. Based on the trash pull, police were now almost certain it belonged to Bryan Koberger. The criminology student who studied murder had allegedly left his genetic signature at the scene of the crime. Think about the irony. A man who allegedly planned everything stalking patterns, disabling his phone, wearing a mask, was brought down by a tiny detail. A single speck of DNA on the snap of a knife sheath he dropped. The evidence was now overwhelming. The car, the phone, the physical description, and now, the DNA. On December 29, 2022, an arrest warrant was issued for Bryan Christopher Koberger for 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of felony burglary. In the pre-dawn hours of December 30th, the quiet neighborhood in the Pocono Mountains of Pennsylvania was shattered by the sound of flashbangs and police commands. A Pennsylvania State Police SWAT team swarmed the Koberger family home. They smashed through the door and windows. And when they burst into the house, they came face to face with the man who had been a ghost for 47 days. The man they found inside was Bryan Koberger. He was taken into custody without a fight. The ghost of King Road was finally caught. He waived his right to an extradition hearing, agreeing to be transported back to Idaho to face the charges. During the flight, law enforcement officers who were with him described his behavior as calm, even chatty. He reportedly asked if anyone else had been arrested. He was curious about the case, like an academic studying a puzzle. Back in Idaho, the charges were read. 4 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of felony burglary. The punishment for a conviction could be death. When asked for his plea, Bryan Koberger stood before the court and said 2 words, not guilty. So, what happens now? The case against him, as we know it from court documents, is built on three powerful pillars. Pillar 1, the car. His white Hyundai Elantra, seen circling the house just before the murders and speeding away just after. Pillar 2, the phone. The cell phone data that allegedly shows him stalking the victim's home for months, turning his phone off during the attack, and then traveling back to his apartment. Pillar 3, the DNA. The most damning piece of evidence. The DNA found on the knife sheath left in the bed with two of the victims, which prosecutors say is a statistical match to him. What could the defense possibly say? His lawyers have presented an alibi. They claim that Brian Kohberger was not at the King Road house on the night of the murders. They say he was out driving, alone, as he often did, late at night. They are challenging the DNA evidence, the cell phone data, and the very foundation of the state's case. The trial will be a battle of forensics, technology, and testimony. But even with a mountain of evidence, there is one huge, gaping hole at the center of this story. One question that investigators have never been able to answer. Why? Why these four students? Kaylee, Madison, Xana, and Ethan. Was there a connection? Did he know them? Investigators have scoured social media and interviewed hundreds of people. To date, they have found no definitive link between Brian Kohberger and any of the four victims. So what was the motive? What turns a man studying the minds of killers into an alleged killer himself? Was this a twisted academic fantasy? A crime born from social isolation and rage? Or something so random and terrifying it defies all explanation? That is the one question that hangs over this entire case. The car, the phone, the DNA, that's the how. But no one, perhaps except for Brian Kohberger himself, knows the why.